I'm going to call to order Board of Education meeting January 30th, 2020, 7 o'clock. Secretary, you take attendance.
Tonight, all the board members are present with the exception of Jackie El Sayed and Mark Bank.
Okay, you're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is public comment. Rebecca, do we have any public comment cards? And for those that are staying, we could amend the agenda later on to have public comment after our presentation on the bond as well. You want to wait then? Okay. Now it's the President's report. Lexi. That's one of our student interns, Lexi Finkelstein, who's going to the podium. So I just have a quick statement. So last month, right before winter break, there was a Blue Point security system activation at the high school. Luckily, there was no threat found. Although we've had several cameras positioned throughout the building, we were unable to identify the person who activated the system. We have taken corrective measures such as increasing the number of cameras, increasing the resolution of the ones we have, and installing a noise-producing cover that will make an accidental or false pull more difficult. While we don't know who activated the system or what the reasons were for the activation were, we know our kids are safe and we were fortunate to be able to say that. We also know that for what was a terrifying 30 to 45 minutes while first responders searched the buildings, we had the unconditional support and love of the community to make sure our students were safe and protected. We have never been more proud of the way our students, staff, first responders, and surrounding businesses and places of worship came together in a time of crisis. The stories we heard from our students were of gratitude. Lifetime Fitness canceled classes to make sure our students had a spacious and comfortable room. The owner of Brooklyn Bagels called me personally to the situation and wanted to know how they could help our students. Clergy at Kirk in the Hills provided not only shelter to our students, but got back safety to their homes. As we know, we could honor a lot more organizations that helped during the frightful day. We wanted to honor some of those at our board meeting tonight. The Bloomfield Hills Township, Police, Fire, and Library all helped, in addition to make sure that our students got home back safely. It meant so much to our frightened students and parents that caregivers to know that their children were in good hands. On behalf of the entire Bloomfield Hills community, we want to recognize the following businesses, first responders, clergy, and municipalities for their overwhelming support you extended to our students, families, and staff during one of the most frightening times in our history. When I call your organization, please come forward to accept the community partnership recognition from Superintendent Watson, along with the entire Board of Education, thanking you for your selfless dedication to the school and students of Bloomfield Hills. Please remain in front of the room after you receive your award so that the board can thank you and we can get some pictures. Our student intern, as I indicated, Alexandra Finkelstein, on behalf of the students, will be handing out these awards. First, the Bloomfield Township Police Department. Next, the Bloomfield Township Fire Department. Next, the Bloomfield Township Municipal Office. The Bloomfield Township Library. Lifetime Fitness. Brooklyn Bagels. And finally, Kirk in the Hills. And before we break, just to let everyone know, certificates of appreciation were also mailed to all the first responders from neighboring cities and townships who aided in the efforts to help keep our students safe and calm. So we now take just a couple of minutes break so we can take some pictures, and then we'll reconvene our board meeting in about 5 minutes.
And there's a reception in the back, please.
This way, yep, and sort of balance height here. Sort of balance height. Slide this way just a little bit so we can get step down and just slightly this way and you're good. Yep, perfect. And I'll let you know if I can't see your face.
All right, we're gonna reconvene our meeting.
We need to get you a gavel.
There was a gavel. There was a gavel.
I'll see if they have one at home. For the next one about history reading, I'll just
Jennifer.
It also keeps unruly board members in line.
Pretty much. Cynthia. Cynthia. Jennifer, get Cynthia. They're on the. They're the executive board of political and they're also the executive board of the political action group. So they're the moms that are really going to help out. And they're going to bring the marketing person.
I saw that a later version came out, yeah.
Yeah, Natalie's the one with the star. Natalie. She's very, yes, she's the ringleader. All right, we're going to, right now I'm going to pass it over to our superintendent, Mr. Watson, who's going to give the superintendent report.
So I'd like to start by kind of giving an update on my 90-day plan so far. So I'll try to keep it brief, but there are some things I definitely would like to share. Within my first 2 weeks, I've had the ability to meet with each board member individually, and that's been great. I've also had the opportunity to meet with 45 individuals that work in the district one-on-one, and an opportunity to really get to know them, hear their story, why they're passionate about what they do, any issues, barriers, or suggestions that would really move the school district forward. I've also met with every principal and associate principal district-wide. I've had the opportunity to meet with the manager of the Nature Center, the supervisor of Wing Lake, and the director of Bowers Farm. I've toured every building and been in almost every building multiple times, seeing some of the students that I met during the interview process and meeting a lot of new students on the way. Looking forward to tomorrow, attending my first POTC meeting, but I've also been able to attend 4 PTO meetings, and the remainder of PTOs I will meet in the next 2 months. I've attended 4 staff meetings with the remainder scheduled in the next 2 months as well. I've shadowed a student at Way Elementary and a student at BHMS. Both were incredible days. At Way, I've noticed I don't really fit well into those little tiny tables and desks, but they don't typically have a 6'4" 4th grader, so it was definitely appropriate for their size of a student. But at both buildings, it was nice because so many students told me what they liked about school, what they would change, and I was able to take a lot of notes, and hearing from their perspective about what would make school more powerful was so meaningful to me. And I appreciate it, as all of you, if you have young children, you know they're brutally honest, and they definitely were brutally honest with me. I've experienced ridership on an afternoon bus route. That was great. I think I threw a lot of people off that were in their driveway waiting for their child, and their child came off the bus, and here comes this grown man. It's not the bus driver. Why is this man following my daughter to the front door? What is going on? And had the opportunity to introduce myself, tell them who I was, why I was on the bus, and they were very appreciative. Held team meetings with district administrators, central office, and cabinet. I met with the Bloomfield Hill Schools Foundation Board. I met with or scheduled meetings with internal and external stakeholder groups as defined in my entry plan. I attended a superintendent's and legislators event and met with Oakland Schools leadership team. I've enjoyed meeting members of the community tonight's meet and greet, and attending many co-curricular athletic events and performances, and look to kind of continue to do that. It's kind of like, where's Waldo? And so if you really want to know where I'm at, if you follow me on Twitter at BHS Watson, you'll kind of get a glimpse of my day and where I'm at.
Do you sleep at all?
I have, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Also, January is School Board Member Recognition Month. So in preparing for that, I'd like to read you something that was shared with me that really explains the impact school board members have. The education of our youth is the foundation upon which the economic, social, and intellectual capital of our state is built. Locally elected school boards play an important role in representative democracy, and decisions made by local boards of education directly influence instruction in Michigan's public schools. Local board members contribute hundreds of hours each year leading their districts, whether it be by deliberating important decisions about curriculum, adopting policies, hiring top-notch personnel and administrators, listening to staff, parent, and student concerns, or recognizing outstanding programs. Board members always keep their eyes on the goal of student achievement. These decisions affect the present and future lives of children and also set direction to prepare all students to be competitive in the local, state, national, and global 21st century economy. Local school board members are exceptional people who tackle the enormous job of governing school districts and demonstrate to the students they serve the high character of civic duty and responsibility that all citizens should engage in. Local School Board Member Recognition Month provides an opportunity to build stronger relationships between the thousands of women and men who champion the cause of public education as board members, their schools, and the communities they serve. The Michigan State Board of Education, Oakland Schools Board of Education, and the Bloomfield Hills Schools administration, staff, and community recognize the many contributions of the Bloomfield Hills Schools Board of Education for their focus on the well-being and achievement of children and celebrate January 2020 as School Board Member Recognition Month. So thank you on behalf of the school district. There are gifts for each one of you. So thank you, and thank you for welcoming me into your community. It's been unbelievable. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. With that, we will move to consent agenda.
I move that the Board of Education approve the recommendations detailed in the consent agenda as follows. Request to approve minutes of a regular meeting December 19th, 2019. Request to approve minutes of a study session from January 16th. Request to approve monthly financial reports. Request to approve disbursement reports. Request to approve a bus purchase. Request to approve an award bid C2001 for summer 2020 projects. Request to approve HR actions as attached. Is there a second?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Consent passes. General discussion, report of FFLA. Howard?
Yes. Thank you, President Colin. On January 16th, the FFLA committee met. That committee is made up of Trustee Bank, Secretary Efros, and myself. We had 5 items on the agenda, 3 of which, quite frankly, we just went through in the consent agenda, so I won't go through those again. The 2 other items were we talk about a mileage stipend. There's a process that the district has related to helping to compensate employees for intra-district mileage as they're driving from building to building. So Kelly Bowl and Tina Kostiuk are reviewing that process that exists, and we'll probably be talking about this at another FFLA meeting in the future. The other item that was not on the consent agenda just now is there was some discussion related to legal fee budgeting. We have in the past had a legal fee summary given to us, a little binder, when we had our prior HR manager, who's kind of the interface with our lawyers. So Kelly Bowl will be giving that to us next month in terms of how much we have spent on legal fees over the last, for the last fiscal year, which is 18-19. And then there was some discussion related to the budgeting aspect of that. And as we go into the 2021 budgeting process, I think we're going to be getting a little bit more detail through the FFLA process and then communicating to the rest of the board in terms of a little bit more detail of what is beneath the top level numbers that we've been getting in the past, not only for legal fees, but also some of the other costs that are expended within the district. So we will be having those discussions over the next few months as we go through the 2020-21 budget process.
Thanks. Any questions for Howard? Very good. Thanks, Howard. Next, board business. Approve the 2019-2020 mid-year budget revisions. Tina?
All right, so for the mid-year budget update, I'm going to be covering highlights of the funds that are required to be budgeted by law. I don't know how to put this lower, and I know it's set up for the taller people to my right, so just manage it. I feel very short right now. So starting with the general fund. The general fund accounts for the district's core operations. So our teaching and learning is the primary piece of the general fund budget. Thanks, Dave.
It's a little slow. Sorry, let me just move
That's okay.
just a little bit for you. Oh,
Okay, that's good.
and thank you, Howard, for grabbing the mic.
So the general fund, just as a recap, some of you have heard me present before, but I always like to repeat for anyone new, especially watching maybe from home, includes all of our general education through 12th grade, as well as special education, our non-center programs special education, and that would go through 26 years old here in Michigan. The funding sources for the general fund, about 3/4 of our revenue comes from what is called the foundation allowance per pupil. That per pupil amount is actually set annually by the state through their budgeting process. And that amount per pupil times our enrollment is the bulk of our general fund revenue. The foundation allowance is comprised of state and local sources, and I have a chart in a moment that might help depict how that split is actually balanced in the budget. What's really key since Proposal A, which is back in 1994, the state changed their funding, and it's called Proposal A. That's what we refer to it as. And under Proposal A, the intent was to look at the per pupil funding of all districts in Michigan, some of which were very high, some were very low, and to narrow that gap. Proposal A did that. Part of the way that is being done is over the years, when an increase is determined for the foundation per pupil, it is actually done in a 2x formula. So those lower funded districts would actually receive twice the amount than the higher funded districts. And you'll see the impact on Bloomfield and any district similar to us in a moment. So the general fund budget for this year includes an original budget, which is the first column of numbers. That original budget is required by law to be developed and approved by the board before July 1st. There are many unknowns, and this year, part of the unknown is even that foundation amount per pupil, because the state's budget was not completed in June before we had to adopt the budget, and so we found out about that in the fall. Thankfully, it was good news, not bad news. And the other piece that's really key is enrollment. So those two numbers multiplied by together are 3/4 of our funding, yet we go into the year not really knowing where that will be. And with enrollment comes staffing levels. So the original budget that we had started out with a fund balance of about $20.5 million, and we ended with about 19.7 before July 1st when the budget had to be adopted. That includes the spending more than we receive of about $775,000. The mid-year budget revisions, we actually go through, and now we know what our fall enrollment is. We know where our staffing is, and we also know how much that foundation per pupil is. So we adjust the numbers mid-year and come with revisions to the board for approval. And that actually did swing us with an enrollment increase this year as a big part of the driver, to a positive number there of 596,911 to the good. So a little bit more coming in than what we're spending. That's what we're projecting right now. There are 2 pages where I have some highlights of the mid-year revisions. Basically, our revenue changed for the better, which included our enrollment increase, as well as some new funding to continue to reimburse us for special education costs that exceed all of our revenue sources for special education services. And then we had also some decreases. Interest rates have been declining. We were very happy in June when we budgeted investment income, but now they've been declining. That's part of it, as well as some of the other things that are listed here, for a total positive impact of about $854,000. And then the next page, looking at expenditure highlights, that had a positive impact too, but you can see there are a whole host of decreases along with increases, and so it all just depends on the category. But net, it was a positive impact to land at that $596,000 in the bottom right corner. When we go to the pie charts, here we have local and state revenue comprising about 92% of our total revenue or income in our main operating fund. The foundation allowance is part of that. And I think what is more impactful than looking at it this way, which are categories that the state requires us to report under, is to look at revenue broken out by looking at the left-hand graph, where foundation allowance is about that 3/4 of the revenue in green, and then looking at the state and local split of that. Because here, local would include the property taxes that all of you pay, along with businesses and what they pay. Hold harmless is a term that many of you have heard, because we have an operating millage that's levied for operations, and that is what the hold harmless is. That term is used in different ways, so it's been confusing over the years as the state uses it in different ways. But the operating millage that our community has so generously approved and renewed over the years since Proposal A is part of that local portion on the right side in blue. This, I know, is a little hard to read, but we are also going to put these slides on the website, which we have a whole host of historical ones out there as well. What this does is really every year we're looking at the inflation rate. And this year, and it actually came out of a report from MSU by Dr. David Arson, where a price deflator is used for an inflationary measure. And it really is a better measurement of local and government spending rather than what many have been using in the past. But basically what this means, when you look at this chart, if you focus only on the two arrows to the far right, Bloomfield Hills Schools is the first arrow in purple. And since Proposal A, when we look at our foundation per pupil, that started out at $10,454 in 1994. Last year, this is the latest year that I have this data, that's why it's not this year. So last year we had $12,244. The cumulative change is about a 17% increase. When we compare that to inflation, using this more accurate measure, that cumulative increase, the inflation factors increased 103%. So this is just showing, when I talk about 2X, Proposal A did narrow that gap, but it's really holding the higher funded districts back a bit, especially when we compare to inflation, more than a bit. The next slide, because enrollment is so important, I like to look at the history and present that very briefly. And here in Bloomfield Hills, the blue line is our total enrollment that we are receiving foundation allowance on. And it's actually in FTEs, which stands for full-time equivalents. That is the measure, because sometimes, even though we have a whole child and a whole head count, it depends on the classes and whether they're taking classes elsewhere, so that's how we're paid. The orange line is actually the general fund. The difference is what's called center programs. So here in Bloomfield, we are a center program operator for the county for our Wing Lake programs, as well as our DHH, or Deaf and Hard of Hearing programs. That is a separate fund that's tuition-based and not part of the general fund. So I like to point out what our total enrollment is, and then also just the general fund impact. On the very bottom, because it's probably a little small to read, but what I was trying to do there, I'm wondering, nope, oh, maybe that does work, is show the 2 years that we had one high school on two campuses. And just because that was a dip, and I haven't been able to prove my theory, but it's just an interesting correlation that I'm showing. And then this year we do have the total of 5,552, and in the general fund 5,409. That may change only by a couple once the audits are done. Those enrollment counts are audited each year. And then here We look at the expenditures in the general fund. For the expenditures, as we would expect, most of our costs are comprised of people, teaching and learning, right? So the blue and the orange are almost 84%, or about $78 million of our general fund total that is going towards salaries and benefits or people. And then the rest is broken out. Purchase services is the name that the state requires us to use, but that would be anything that's contracted outside, substitutes that might be contracted, anything that's not an employee where we're purchasing a service. We are outsourced for our custodial, and that would be included in that number as well. Now, general fund is required by law to have a budget. The other requirement is for our special revenue funds to have a budget. And our special revenue funds, first starting just in total, include International Academy, center programs, the Recreation Community Services Fund, food services, a new one called Hills Activities, co-curricular endowment. International Academy and center program are their own funds, and they are tuition-based, and they are not supported by the general fund by having their own fund. The recreation and community services are many of the recreation programs that all of you take at various locations throughout the whole district. Food services, we know, provides our student meals. And then Hills Activities is new. I have some fine print notes that you can look at, but there were accounting rules changed that required us to look at monies being held by the district on behalf of groups, whether they're student groups, whether our PTOs, follow our processes and procedures, and then divide up the money into different funds. So there's a new Hills Activity Fund that would not include PTOs, but anything that's internal, so the class of. That doesn't mean that we're doing any more. It's basically an accounting thing, and so now it'll be part of this fund rather than just being in our annual audit report. And for today, that's all I'll say about that, but more than happy to answer questions for anyone if you have them. So in our special revenue funds, the two largest ones, and the ones that sometimes I get the most questions on, are International Academy and our center programs. So first, just looking at International Academy, the original budget had I'll call it a loss to simplify the term, of about $126,000. Our students that enrolled and came to school in the fall were actually less than projected, which had a negative impact on the budget of about $179,000. The staffing costs also have a negative impact when we look at actual staffing. The way the International Academy is staffed is actually not all from Bloomfield. International Academy is actually a consortium of 13 districts. Of the 13 districts, 10 of those attend the campus here in Bloomfield Hills. And then there are 2 other campuses in Troy and Huron Valley. We, Bloomfield Hills, are the fiscal agent for that particular campus and are required to develop a budget, present it to the consortium board, and then also have our board approve it. And that's actually done pretty early. Right around now, we're working on that particular budget for next year. So as we do that, the staffing is comprised of teachers from all of the districts that are attending and follow those bargaining agreements. So oftentimes at this point in the year, for next year, we don't always know all of the details of the salary benefit or what that would be. So now that we do, we have a mid-year adjustment for this particular fund. And then that lands the spending over revenue of about $369,000. And then on the next slide for our center programs, as I mentioned, we're a county center operator for Wing Lake and our deaf and hard of hearing programs. Our original budget was about $215,000, spending more than we take in. That is also tuition-based. Oakland Schools, the county, Oakland Schools, is involved when we submit a budget to them of determining what the tuition will be for every student, depending on the particular category they fall into. And right now, we actually had a positive impact from enrollment because we had increases, as you see there, of the different students coming into those programs. And then we also had staffing costs that increased. And those vary, especially by the needs of the students that we take care of. We had an increase in purchase services. Part of that would be contracting some nursing staff, and that was the bulk of that piece, ending with a loss, if you will, of $678,000 this year. So those are the two key ones. Then I would also just point out that on the website, under Finance, we have many different links. Not only the transparency icon you see in the upper left that gives you more data than just Finance, but also the different presentations over the years that we just keep adding to. Some of which are much more detailed or succinct, but if you ever have any questions, I'm always available for that.
Any questions? Thank you, Tina. Those are Howard.
Okay, Tina, I posed a few questions on the beginning of this week, and you covered some of them in your presentation. So that the center programs has now about a $700,000 loss. First question is any of that recoverable through tuition?
No, so the tuition is set, and if you recall, the center program tuition has a contingency percentage built in. So up to a certain point, as we know some of the final numbers in the fall, then we provide those, and those might be recoverable. But at a point where we have unexpected expenditures, if we have 5 people go out on leave and then we have to cover those costs and they couldn't be anticipated in any of the budgets that we submit, that is what the contingency percent is for. So there are reserves in the center program that would cover that.
So we had a contingency, and I think it's 10%, if I remember right?
It's actually 7%.
7%. So, but because of the law, or we went through that contingency and we went over the contingency, and that's why we've got an additional loss. So our costs were even greater than the 670,000, but we had a contingency. It was maybe 900,000, and we used some of the contingency to offset that, so it's only 700,000. Is that right?
Because you're asking about contingency, I would ask that I just go specifically and look at exactly how much that is based on tuition,
All right.
and then we can compare that to the loss and talk about it. I don't want to guess at
So what I'm
numbers.
thinking for next year, should our contingency be even larger?
The contingency is determined by the county, and that is for all center programs in the county. So that's not something that we can say we want more or less.
So maybe our cost estimate should be higher, trying to anticipate for the next year, so we don't have almost $1 million loss showing in the future.
No, I understand that. And I would just caution, I can look at more details, so I'm not,
Okay.
because I don't have a concern based on where the center program is, but I would rather look at the tuition, look at the
Because
contingency.
in general, year by year, we've had favorability because of that contingency. We haven't needed it. This year, we've needed it and more so. So that's issue number one. The other one is on the IA. You showed the $400,000 loss, which is unfortunate. But what it shows also is that we used to have like a fund balance of over $1 million or so. It was a lot of money, and year by year it's been going down. This year, at this point, with a $400,000 loss, we're at an $80,000 fund balance,
That's what's projected, yes.
and we have a loss right now of $400,000. So it's possible that we might be in a negative fund balance situation. What does that mean for the IA going into the future?
As you know, that is what is being discussed and worked on over the months. So we are one of 13 districts. And so that, as far as where that's going with the agreement revisions and all the discussions,
Given
I don't
the
have an answer.
current, so you're going to be doing the budgeting for the 2020-21 school year over the next month or two for the IA. We have a joint steering, or not a joint, but we have an agreement right now that right now, we're living under the agreement that we had from 10, 15 years ago. So let's
Correct.
go under the rules that we currently have. No new rules. What happens if we are in a loss situation for the IA?
So
Or not a loss, but a negative fund balance situation.
we are working on the budget for next year, similar to the district when we've had to look at budget balancing actions. That's one. And the other piece is looking at the level of tuition for next year. So we are scheduling the meeting with all of the business managers, especially based on the mid-year budget, but we knew that this was coming based on what we saw, and that is yet to be seen. I don't have those yet because it's going to involve the other district business managers as well.
So could I ask, and maybe for the board also, in general, this board has really not gotten involved at all in the IA budgeting and tuition setting process. But now that we're basically at almost a negative fund balance, can we, before that tuition is set, And as we look at as you work on the projections for the 2020-21 budget year for the IA, can you review that with our board? And so we can sort of understand where this whole thing is and what, if there are tuition increases or cost reductions, that we understand what those are and that this board is in agreement with that?
And we have many avenues to keep you updated, so I would anticipate doing that. And FFLA is another avenue that we have as well.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Howard, I've also requested that DP discussions in the BIC committee be married with IA discussions as well, so we can
Excellent.
look at the two factors side by side. I have, are you finished?
I'm done. Thank you.
Tina, I have a question just about enrollment, because the consortium agreement doesn't specify seats, although we specify that with our financial commitment to 30 seats a year. If we are actually down 27 seats, that must be across the 4 years, right? Is there a way for us to recoup back to 120 seats in like, say, the next year going forward? Or are we limited to 30 seats every 9th grade year?
So because we are living under the current agreement that's looking to be revised, I'd want to reread that language.
Yeah.
Because all of us had said so many discussions where it's either clear or it's not clear, and we have questions about adding clarity to the current language, right? So I'd rather not answer that.
Yeah, I don't think it's even specified in the agreement, because I think it just lays out each district and their seats. But that, even in lieu of a full consortium agreement rewrite for the next school year, I think it would be worth posing that question to the JSC about whether, you know, any district can retain its maximum seats if there's been attrition, by maybe increasing numbers next year for 9th grade.
Just so you know, any consortium agreement changes probably won't happen, if we're lucky, by June. This budgeting process will be long since done. So it's really important that we work through this now before we get to any changes.
Do we have any questions, Tina, just about the budget?
Just so people understand, because we had or are having the lottery for next year, and I don't want people to be misled. It sounds like there's 27 extra seats. Can you clarify, and Jennifer said it, but can you clarify why people aren't getting seats in a lottery and they're told that it's at capacity when there's 27 extra seats?
Yeah, as far as the details and clarity to it, I focused on the numbers. I'm happy to look into seeing whatever else I can provide.
I mean,
the
my
board.
understanding is that these are in upper grades, and so because of, like you said, or Jennifer, talking about attrition, that there aren't 27 seats available at the IA for incoming freshmen, because it seems illogical to have, fund balance issues and be turning people away at the same time when we're short students. So what we're talking about is upper grade due to attrition. Is that, am I right in that?
I think as part, Jennifer, as part of her discussion, that links in our diploma program with the International Academy as part of one of the next meetings of BIC. I think, that's obviously going to be talked about.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if Tina is privy, because again, we're one of 13, to some of this information as they're going to be meeting and discussing. I don't think Tina has probably that information now.
And for
Okay.
the community's clarity, with the lottery being in a week, those 30, that's not going to change. It's going to be 30 9th grade seats, so I don't want anyone to think that we're not that nimble with making these changes.
But
All right.
Do we have any other questions
I
before I
have,
make a motion on the budget?
Well, I just want to agree with President Colin that we as a board and the administration need to have an extensive conversation about our DP program, the IA program, and how the whole thing fits together. This is something we've been wanting to do for a year now, so it really is very important that we really get into the meat of this.
Okay.
All right,
do we-
and I just, quickly, Tina, you said that you're preparing a budget that will be reviewed by the JSC as a fiscal agent. Are the other fiscal agents also preparing a budget that will be reviewed by the JSC?
So we actually just sent out a poll to see when all of them could meet, including the other fiscal agents. So I don't know where they're at in the process.
Okay, but we'll get to see that in terms of making the analysis that Jennifer's talking about, our own diploma program, the IAA. We'll get to see all the numbers from all the different districts.
Well, the different.
Fiscal agents.
The fiscal agents, the campuses.
So just being one of three, I am not, I can't make promises on behalf of the other two. I just know what we're trying to do in terms of setting up a meeting like we have before with all the business
Yeah.
managers.
Can you just keep us updated?
All right, do we
And realize also
I
that
do
that
wanna-
the
I do wanna-
superintendent, you're one of the members of the JSC.
All right, Howard,
Tina's the
I don't want
fiscal
this
agent.
to be an IA discussion. This is a budget,
Okay.
approving a
All right,
budget.
one
Any
more question
questions
about the
beyond
budget. Sorry. It looks like per pupil, we take in a lot in local taxes. So I've gotten a lot of questions about why can't we use that money that comes from millages or bonds that we get from local taxes? Why can't we use that to get more teachers, reduce class sizes? Are there restrictions on what we can spend the money on that comes from the general fund?
So the foundation allowance per pupil comes in for us to use. We focus on operations, teaching and learning. And I would say, and I know there are maybe just a handful of questions not yet answered, but it was going back to when I first came here, we were doing a study on our per pupil revenue and spending. Overall, I'll say generally, based on our low class sizes, we have a great level of instructional support staff. Those are the pieces that we started to look at again. And keeping in mind that districts actually, when you compare to other districts, which is part of the question, it depends on what they include in their general fund. So we do have two gems, the farm and the nature center. We have our recreation program separate, but also contained in our general fund is our preschools, where other districts might account for them separately. So those are the things we're using our operating millages on, separate from capital millages. And that's something that I have more slides. I could have gone a lot longer tonight, but I don't think that there was a stomach for all of that. So the capital and the operating are two separate millages. And we are very fortunate to have our Hold Harmless millage, and we're using that as much as possible towards teaching and learning. That's what we're using it on.
Okay. thanks.
Lisa, so the general fund is primarily the foundation allowance, and there are a few things called the categoricals, but they're pretty small.
Right.
The foundation allowance can be spent on anything.
Right,
Okay.
but.
You spend on the
Well,
buildings,
we'll
I
get into
mean-
it, because I'm sure
we-
that will come under the next
Any more
category.
questions for Tina on her presentation?
Thank
Then
you,
Can
Tina.
someone make a motion?
I move to approve the budget, the mid-year budget revisions for 2019-2020.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, Tina. Mid-year budget is approved. Pat Watson, presentation on the bond, scope and design.
Is that about right there? That's good.
So just before Pat,
Easy people.
before you go, just for my colleagues, if we could try to refrain from, letting Pat go through the presentation, questions at the end, and then we'll each have a statement to be made before we go for the vote.
So I want to start by talking about 7th grade me. I was, believe it or not, that's actually a haircut. My hair was quite long before that. And I want to talk about how 7th grade me, in my interactions with a teacher named Mr. Bryant, brought me to who I am today and why I'm here in front of you. So I started 7th grade like any other kid in Ann Arbor in the 80s. Excited to go roller skating, if you remember that. Go to the arcade, play Dig Dug, play video games. The nights of trying to make sure I could fit into my Jordache jeans. And some of you had them, I know you did, don't deny it. Mine no longer would fit, well, maybe one leg, but definitely not two. And school was something, to be honest, that was done to me. I wasn't a big fan of school. I didn't like just sitting there and filling out packet after packet after packet. And that changed in 7th grade when I walked into Mr. Bryant's class. So imagine, here I am, I'm the 7th grader, I'm fairly tall, 5'11". I walk into a teacher who's about 5'6". And I kind of tower over him, and he's got a three-piece suit on. And he's got this stern look on his face. And I'm thinking, oh boy, it's going to be another year of packets and what I didn't really appreciate and like about school. And it changed within that first week of school. So I'm at my little desk, and it's the old-fashioned desk where you lift up the top, you have all your stuff, and Mr. Bryant says, all right, lift up your desk, put everything away the way it needs to be put away. And I put it away. That's great. Then he said, stand up. I said, oh boy, here we go. What's going on? He said, we're going outside. This is a science class. We went outside, we got soil samples, plant samples, water samples, and we brought it into the classroom. He said, when we learn about science in my class, you're going to see it. You're going to touch it. You're going to feel it. You are going to be one with science, and you are going to learn to love school. And at that moment, I decided I want to be a teacher. I want to give you guys the same experience that I had that changed my life. Without Mr. Bryant, I would have been just another number, just another Scarlet Middle School kid in the mid-'80s. It would not be here today. So when we talk about why is tonight important, why are we here, there's a couple different things. We want to make sure that every learner today and tomorrow deserves our best, the best that we can give in every aspect of education. Every learner deserves barrier-free environments, opportunities and experience that ignite passion. I became passionate about school. I started looking forward to going to school rather than looking forward to going home to see who the guest VJ was going to be. If you don't know what that is, Google it on your iPhone 50 or whatever, and you'll understand what a guest VJ was. In a place in which to belong and thrive, I felt like I could see myself as someone that could not only be an educator, but someone that belonged in school, and school was no longer done to me, but I was part of school. Now there's other parts of the why. We need to look at safety and security. It's not 1984 for me, and I'm in middle school. Things are a lot different. In Bloomfield schools, we have an aging infrastructure, 33 million in critical needs. Without this, we'll have to manage the decline due to lack of funding. Not enough students in each middle school, programming in danger. Okay? Throughout the state of Michigan, we know the narrative. Enrollment continues to shrink. Consistency in building configurations. There's a lack of community spaces and community green space. Now more than ever, in this age of technology, we need to reconnect with the outdoors and give all people, from birth to whenever, that opportunity. As a community, we have not invested in our schools with capital millages. The surrounding neighbors have continued to do so. Year after year after year. When you see a community saying, vote for this millage, vote for this bond, no new taxes, it's just renewal. That's because they've paid those millions, often hundreds of millions already, and then are going to pay again. We have not asked the community in Bloomfield Hills to do that. We promised the community that we would address our pre-K through 8th grade needs after approximately the first 4 years of operating Bloomfield Hills High School. That's now. We need to utilize the best assets we have in the district without building new. We're not looking to start from scratch, tear it down and build over. We're looking at what do we currently have? How can we enhance it? How can we give the best opportunity to everyone here? So where have we been? How did we get here? So it's really a 6-year story. It starts in 2014 with the master property planning, followed by the middle school design, followed by facility and technology assessment. And for me, as someone being new to the district and having this come up, I wanted to know, is this a 3-month process? Has it been a year process? Has it been 5 years, 6 years? How do we get to this point? And for me to see, it's been a long, well thought out process. Nothing that was spur of the moment, nothing that was just haphazardly done, makes me feel so comfortable. Coming from a district that values education to a district that values education as well, this is what I felt I needed to see to be comfortable. To the moonshot thinking, followed by a strategic plan, then a board decision on the brighter future, realizing that as a board, they want to do the best for every single person that's not only here now, but in the future. To scope and design, in the board presentations in 2019, which I got to watch, and then being part of the board presentation today in 2020. So what are we really talking about? We're talking about two preschool locations. So Blooming Preschool Eastover site and at the Conant site. 4 elementary schools. Lone Pine at West Hills Middle School site and Eastover at East Hills Middle School site. Wayne Conant will receive additions and renovations. 2 middle schools from 3 to 2. Again, making sure we're providing as much opportunity and programming as possible for all students. So Bloomfield Hills Middle School, north at the Losser site. Bloomfield Hills Middle School south at Bloomfield Hills Middle School site. As far as what would happen at BHHS, athletics, mechanical, technology, and then community areas. We are lacking parks and green spaces. So looking at pool, parks, the farm, nature center, things that enhance it for every single person that's here regardless of their age. So what do the feeder patterns look like? We'd have the Blooming Preschool, Way Eastover would feed into the north site, Lone Pine and Conant would feed into the south site, and then all roads lead to Bloomfield Hills High School. Safety. What safety enhancements are we looking for? Construction of secure entries. As someone, again, that's been visiting buildings, that's something the sooner we can get to, the better. It's a day and age where things are a lot different. Improve traffic patterns. Install safety film. Install fire sprinkler systems. Install video surveillance, which in this day and age, as we know, is critically important that we can identify people as they're coming in the building, when they're in the building, where they're going in the building. Upgrade access control, making sure we know who's coming in, who's coming out, and when it's going on. Install visitor management systems. Upgrade entrance intercoms. And I know I got a chance to see the intercom at Way, and it reminded me of Leave It to Beaver. When Eddie Haskell got in, I'm dating myself, when Eddie Haskell got in trouble and they paged him over the PA, I'm like, that's that same system. Wow. For young people, that's when TV was black and white. Before color TV or cable, there was this show called Leave It to Beaver. Again, Google it. All right. And upgrade district-wide public address systems. Education. Not only does the work environment look different, education looks different. We need to enhance our educational facilities for our students so they can be the best students they can be. So install classroom interactive displays and sound systems. Upgrade the technology infrastructure. Update architectural components. Improve lighting and indoor air quality. Create STEM and collaborative work environments for students pre-K through 12. Upgrade and enhance media centers. Improve ADA accessibility and inclusive playground settings so all students have the opportunity to be engaged. Improve special education and learning spaces with the creation of new sensory rooms and new therapy rooms. Preserve and enhance programming options and opportunities. The programs that are available to students in this school district are unbelievable. If you're a student, I challenge you to look throughout the state of Michigan and what other districts offer. And you'll be shocked that your home district offers opportunities that almost no one else in the state of Michigan has. And that's special. And that's probably why each one of your parents made the decision to move to Bloomfield Hills and not someplace else. Community. How do we make this a space so everyone, again, feels welcome and part of the community? So at middle school, there'll be middle school north, there'll be a community education pool. They'll be open during the day for public to go in and use. District Career Exploration Center, STEM, robotics. Farm expansion for new community experiences. Nature Center enhancements, again, for new community experience. To create things that don't exist for community members right now. Grass and park space possibilities. And enhanced spaces for family recreation and performance in schools. All things that are greatly needed, and all things that make Bloomfield Hills a desired destination as people look to relocate and move. These are all things people are looking for. Stakeholder voice. Where does all this information come from? This is one of the questions I have. Who got a chance to weigh in? Whose voice has actually been heard? So during the Mastery Property Planning from 2014 to 2016, students, staff, community, families, municipality elected officials, and field experts. During the middle school redesign from 2017 to 2018, administrators and teachers. For the facility and technology assessment in 2018, physical plant service staff, IT, and again, field experts. The moonshot thinking, and I enjoy getting all the information, so thank you, team, for providing that as well. 2018 and 2019, staff, community, families, and again, field experts, the outside voice, who that's what they do every day. The strategic plan in 2019, all stakeholders. Scope and design and focus panels in 2019, students, staff, community, families, and again, field experts. This makes me incredibly excited and happy knowing that people were given the opportunity to have a voice and weigh in over an extended amount of time. The data has been collected and now it's being delivered. So as far as the tax rate, what does it really cost? Where is it really at? So if you look as of right now in 2019, where Bloomfield Hills ranks. So proposed Bloomfield Hills schools bond tax rate increase of the 1.5 mils. Right now you can see Bloomfield Hills right down at the bottom. If the bond were to pass, where does Bloomfield Hills rank? Instead of the bottom, up a little bit, but you can see the districts that are above. Birmingham, Royal Oak, Claresville, Wall Lake, Troy, Rochester, Berkeley, Waterford, Clarkson, Novi, Madison, West Bloomfield, South Lyon, Huron Valley, Avondale, Ferndale, Holly, Oxford, Oak Park, Clawson, Lake Orion, Brandon, Hazel Park. That shows fiscal responsibility. That shows that your board thinks long and hard before spending money or asking for money. So what's it going to cost? If the taxable value of your home is $250,000, for example, so your home value is right about $500,000, $500,000, it'd be about $462 per year. If your taxable value of your home was $500,000, so a home that's about $1 million, maybe a little over $1 million, the cost will be $925 per year. That's what we're talking about. So the focus areas. Where are we looking to improve so we can grow? Safety and security. Academics, with a focus on teaching and learning that fits the needs of a 21st century workspace that all of our students are going to go into. We've all been to school. School's starting to look different than when we were there. The jobs look different than when we were there. Arts, athletics, and community spaces. And inclusive spaces and a focus on our special education students. Again, from birth until the end, there is something appealing and available for every single person in this community. Thank you.
Question. I know I spoke to, I just wanted to validate. So one of the things we're going to be voting on tonight is when we put it on the ballot. Question that I have is if we waited, as opposed to putting it May, putting it later, let's say August or November, what in terms of how much delay would it have in potential getting everything operational and a potential savings in terms of the efficiencies that we would see with this new plan?
Yeah, great question. So as far as the planning, middle schools will be one of the early starting areas. We're looking at about a full year delay. And then as far as financially, Brian was great, did some of the numbers and look at the savings there. If it were to pass in May, instead of waiting to go on longer, it would be about $2.2 million in savings that we could recoup right at that point. So there is the cost, obviously, full transparency up front to fund it. But then if it passes at that time, you're saving over $2 million. So in the long run, you're saving a ton of money.
Yeah, thank you.
So why would delaying it from May, let's say, to August, 3 months? Why is that going to put transition time? Why is that adding another year on transition?
Brian, if you could kind of help explain a little more details on that. Thank you. I'll hold you.
Well, you are tall.
Yeah.
We have to lower
So
the desk, Brian?
it delays it because of the design time and then getting out to bid. So if we pass in May, we can start designing the middle schools immediately and have bid packets out in the wintertime to start construction that following spring. If we pass in the fall, we'll be designing through the winter. We miss the bidding opportunity, which makes us miss that summer, which delays us a year.
And the bidding opportunity is statutory?
No, it's just what the market will bear.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to be going to bid in the springtime when everybody's already got work lined up for the summer.
Oh,
Howard?
You just mentioned something I had not heard before. You said there's a cost savings by doing it earlier, $2 million or so. What's entailed in that savings? Where is that savings coming from?
So the savings is from cost escalation of materials and labor.
Okay, so this is in the this is not in the operations cost of the
Correct.
of the
It's
district,
construction
it's in the
costs.
construction.
Correct.
So just a few months delay will cause an increase of 1%. It's
Well,
$2
think
million,
about how-
so $2 million, so about 1% increase in the cost.
You're
because
really
of that?
delaying it a year because of what I just explained
Okay,
by the time you design and go out to bid.
okay.
I realize it's unlikely that we can actually quantify it, but, and cost savings is not the motivation on this bond, but the fact of the matter is we are taking two properties, two buildings down in this process. That would be Fox Hills and Lone Pine. We will be adding square footage at other sites, but they would be more efficient, maybe energy smart, environmentally smart spaces. So I'm estimating that there is some operational savings that will be resulting from the total investment in the bond.
Yeah, there certainly would be. There certainly would be with maintenance and utilities.
And-
I just want to make sure, when you say taking down, you mean that they won't be housing students, but what's happening with the physical structure hasn't yet been decided?
Well,
No.
demolition costs are in this bond.
Right.
All right.
So at this point, they would be like Pine Lake, which would be a
Right.
piece of property with no land and no building on it.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you that, the demolition costs are very small in the entire bond, and that, this bond program will go on for 6 years. So, a few years into the bond, things may change. Populations could change, ideas might change, materials can change, prices for different things will change, and we might change our mind. The board hasn't decided that, in fact, those buildings will be torn down, but it is budgeted for those buildings to be taken down.
And to add on to what Cynthia said, not only will we have 2 fewer buildings, but we are now going from 3 middle schools to 2. So there might be some operational cost because now you got 2 middle schools being operated instead of 3.
Right,
But
if
then you got Eastover operating as a preschool center. So it's not really
We'd have to go
it's-
through
yeah.
the numbers with Tina, but
Right.
Mhm.
But hopefully, bottom line, we're looking that there should be some operational savings as a result of the
Absolutely.
process.
And when we did the high school, down to one high school, the $2.5 million number was talked about extensively. So that would be a lovely thing for you guys to work on with Tina in terms of what actually are the operational impacts of this whole thing. Once everything is by 2025 or 6 and everything is all up to speed, what happens operationally? Thank you.
Brian, if we aren't sure about what we're going to do with buildings that are non-operational, do you have any idea how much it costs to keep vacant buildings, like the mid?
Yeah, I think it's about 30%. We called it simmering the buildings back in the day when we were simmering Hickory Grove and Pine Lake, and those numbers proved about 30% of the utility cost.
So, just ballpark figure, how much per year did it cost to keep Pine Lake open till it was, or to keep it standing?
This is on TV and recorded.
If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Don't
know,
make
but
something
like
up.
the $18,000 to $20,000 range.
And quite frankly, we're doing it right now with the Lauser campus.
That's correct.
We have half a
That's
building there.
correct. Yep.
Jennifer, you have any questions? Nope. Any more questions?
No questions, I do have some statements.
No, okay. No, so if we're done with questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian, Pat. So what we're going to do now, there's going to be two things that we're going to vote on as a board. We're going to vote on the concept for the scope and design, which Pat outlined in front of us. Then we're going to vote on a resolution on whether we put the bond on the ballot for May 2020. So I've told my colleagues in advance we'll have up to 5 minutes to prepare a statement in terms of our thoughts. I have a statement prepared from Jackie, which I'll read, and we have a video clip from Mark that we will play. So with that, why don't we start off with Jennifer?
Mine might be 6 minutes.
What? If you want, I could start off.
Yeah. No, okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for anyone who's watching at home. Basically, it is time for us to be courageous and be vulnerable to opposition in order to do the right thing for our children, our community, and our future. As we just saw in the presentation, this endeavor has not come out of left field. Facilities assessments have been occurring for years. The high school was the critical need some years ago, and now we can no longer deny that we have pushed the aged pre-K to 8 facilities as far as they can go, and to put more money into their maintenance without upgrade is no longer fiscally responsible, as we would ultimately spend more and having to put good money after bad. 2 elementary schools were closed in order to right-size a district with a lower population than 20 to 30 years ago. This project is not an about-face on past decisions. Rather, it is the continuation of optimal conjoining of facilities and cohort sizes that will protect and grow programs, enhance safety, and move to the right kinds of environments and facilities that future-facing education requires. We are asking all of us, the taxpayers, for money. This is not a situation anyone craves, but it is necessary at this time. Not to make these overdue changes is a dereliction of our duty as custodians of education. This district, as you have seen, has a solid track record of fiscal responsibility and stewardship. We have one of the highest percentage fund balances, in other words, savings, and one of, if not the lowest debt service of any district in the state. We're currently, as you just saw, the lowest in Oakland County. Many of our sister districts have recently passed large bonds, mainly renewal millages, on the retirement of old debt. This is not our situation because we have much lower total debt service from long-term historic constraint, and this is even taking into account the high school rebuild. We are proud of this track record. We are a fortunate district that is well funded by Michigan standards, and we spend money on our operations, which are 85% comprised of personnel costs. We are in the people business. We have competitor teacher salaries, smaller class sizes, wide breadth of programming choices, and a robust special education population, and we maintain in-house busing. These are different in comparison with surrounding districts. As an aside, this board has asked for and was recently reported to on data regarding diminished central administrative costs over the past 10 years. Neither operational funds nor limited sinking funds aimed at repairs, nor land sales, nor consuming our fund balance, nor any combination of these can cover our substantive capital needs, which is necessary every so often. They are different buckets. We have pushed these facilities very far. Everything has a life cycle. As a wise community member told me, if we don't invest in the future, we won't have a very good one to look forward to. So many of us came here for the quality of our education. I would ask you, is it not our obligation to this great community to help ensure that people who cherish education keep choosing Bloomfield as their home? Don't we want our adult children to settle and raise their own families here? When it may be time to relocate, don't we want the people buying our homes to actively target Bloomfield because they are excited about having a top educational resource? In short, the projects that will be realized by the passage of this bond are very sound, both financially and morally, and they are necessary. If we put off these improvements any longer, it will cost us much more in the long run, both in terms of dollars and human cost to diminish programming and safety of our children, as well as compromising our character and our ongoing attraction as a destination district for students, teachers, and families. Believe me, my daughter goes to IA, and I have learned a lot in some very humble buildings. We are not equating bright, shiny objects with educational excellence. The board and Superintendent Watson will not waver in our primary commitment to continuous improvement in teaching and learning while capital improvements are being made, several of which impact educational quality. We expect all of us to have this on our radar every day and will be accountable. But these two processes must occur simultaneously. If we wait for the one to decide the other, our goals will never be realized. For all questions, concerns, and ideas raised around the bond endeavor, and some excellent ones have come across already, it is our board's pledge to be inquisitive and responsive to these, maintaining the highest possible transparency with all aspects of the process through its execution. Basically, whatever you need to know to help you better understand the matter, we will help you find that information. Whatever you want to discuss, we will discuss this with you and we will listen. We have a communications portal on the bond webpage at www.bloomfield.org/bond, and we are just an email or a phone call away. Both of them are on the Board of Ed webpage of the district's website. Together, we have an opportunity to build something very excellent and very lasting for all of us, younger, older, and in between, to include enhanced community time in unique community spaces such as Bowers Farm and the Johnson Nature Center. At the end of the day, this is an introspective and a philosophical question on how we individually and collectively feel about the dedication of our resources. I sincerely hope that the community will unite around spending that, unlike others that taxpayers may be called to vote upon, is only aimed at the betterment of minds, hearts, and human potentials. It is not possible to have pristine information about the sentiments around this project. We should not have trepidation around starting the campaign process now, because at the end of the day, we know that this is right and necessary. The work must be done. There are pros and cons to starting now versus starting later. I have been through this over many sleepless nights, and I do not see a weightier benefit in waiting versus digging in. If you have not been to our pre-K-8 facilities for some time, we are happy to show you around to better illustrate our needs and what we are discussing. We are going to do the utmost to have very good communications with the entire community through town halls, mail, social media, but again, please reach out if you have questions. And now the final ask. We need your human resources, your ideas, your questions, your expertise, and your relationships to steer this bond proposal for pre-K-8 facilities overhaul to success. Please take this journey with us. Please join our community volunteer advocacy group, and please speak with everyone that you know, locally and socially, about the importance of this project. Please make it a part of your day. Conversations and continued dialogue are our path forward. We will all learn, we will all contribute, and we will grow our relationships and be together as a community should be.
So while David comes out, we have, Mark, who's not here, has a video segment. We're going to go this way. So, Dave, if you can come out. So, before Dave presses, just to reiterate, I've spoken to Mr. Bank, one of my colleagues on the board. He couldn't be here for business reasons, but he's indicated to me he's fully supportive of the scope and design. He was on scope and design, and fully supportive of a resolution to go on the ballot in May 2020.
Well, let's not forget that this whole conversation started about academics. And a large part of the conversation was scope and design, and where the conversation started with scope and design was all about academics. And the reality of the situation, and there's a lot of different moving parts here, but the reality of the situation was this school district, with its population going forward, can no longer academically support 3 middle schools. Just by way of example, and some of you have heard this, but this is also being televised. So to the extent you have 3 middle schools that have 10 kids in band at one, 10 in band at the other, and 10 in band at the other, you can't run band with 10 kids. You can't run French with 10 kids at each school. And we'll end up cutting programs that where if we put kids together in the right size schools, now we'll have maybe 20 kids for band at one, 20 at the other, and enough kids to run a football team and enough kids to do this project in that language and all of that. So in order to get to that point, you need the two right middle schools. We looked at, should we be one middle school? Should we be two middle schools? Should we be three middle schools? And ultimately, from an educational perspective, it was the Scope and Design Committee, which included educators, community members, board members, people from all walks of life in this community, came to the recommendation that we should be a two middle school district to best educate our students. From there, the question then became to get the right numbers of kids in those buildings. Then where on the elementary school, this 550, we talked about going to 3 elementary schools, 6 elementary schools, and looked at the right numbers for all of that and came up with 550 was the right size to provide the best educational opportunities for the district, for the kids in the district. But in order to do that, you had to have the right buildings. And then it went to then we got to structure. So this was all about education first. And then we got to the point, well, you could spend $30 or $40 million to take your 1955 Buick and make it a nice, shiny 1955 Buick, but 2 years from now, it's still going to be a 1955 Buick that has the limitations of that doesn't provide you what you need not only in 2020, but in 2070. So this is kind of a multi-generational task we're looking at, is how to best provide for this community educationally. And let's not lose sight of that. We're talking about bricks and mortar tonight, but these guys spend a ton of time, and a lot of other people spend a ton of time, and I'm not tasking you, I'm just filling in a blank that I think was left out on the slide that talked about stop and slow down and the path forward. We spent a lot of time as a board going through the academics and the financial and how to make this the best academic structure for the district, and then now how do we build it to support that? And rather than demolishing everything and starting over with 6 new shiny buildings, we're able to take a lot of what we have and repurpose, reconfigure, and do all that. And a lot of time, going to your point, was spent going through estimations of costs. If you do it this way, if you do it that way, if you do it that way. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But to build every piece of it out in advance, I think is nearly an impossible.
Well,
No, I
I think, Mark, you made a wonderful point.
Howard?
I've already spoken, so. Other than the decision to hire Mr. Watson, the decision we are making tonight on when we move forward on this bond is the most important decision we are being asked to make since I've been on this board. Other than the high school, all of our buildings were built during the baby boom of the 50s and 60s, when some of us were actually going to school. They were all built with mid-century education models that no longer work. They were all built to handle a student population of 10,000 students. And as we saw from Tina's presentation a few minutes ago, we now have just over half that many students in the district. So as, again, coming from the auto industry, you need to continue, unfortunately, to right-size your organization. And we've been doing that over the past 10 to 15 years, but this sounds like, quite frankly, the final step in that process. They were all built during post-World War II designs with a building energy infrastructure that considered fossil fuels unlimited and leaded gasoline costs at 35 cents a gallon. They were all built before school lockdowns and shootings were commonplace. We need to update and upgrade our buildings. We need to agree that the plans that the Scope and Design Committee has presented to us is the way to go. Based on what I've heard over the past few weeks, I think it is. I will be voting in favor of adopting the recommendations of the Scope and Design Committee. The only thing I would add on top of the comments that I had here is we need to really take our transparency efforts to the next level. we really need to, as Mark was just saying, there's a huge amount of work that was done in terms of looking at alternatives and why alternatives were considered and not taken forward. And also the cost estimates of $200 million that we've got has a lot of detail that some people in the community would love to see. Our numbers that we've put, and we didn't even give the details in this presentation, we gave it a few weeks ago, but they were very top-level numbers, building by building. And we really need to provide the community the $33 million detail, the $200 million detail, and also all of the alternatives that were, what were our design criteria. Mark went through a lot of them, and then what were the different alternatives and why we decided not to go with those alternatives, and this one is the best alternative. We really need to show that to the community to be able to justify why the Scope and Design Committee came up with this alternative and why this is the best alternative. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard. Lisa?
I don't usually like to talk after Jennifer because she steals all the things that I was going to say. But here goes.
Which were learned from you.
If you've ever been in middle school, in the hall, you'll see kids studying in the hallways. You'll see students making the most of the space that they have. If you've ever been there during lunchtime, you'll see kids lined up to buy lunch well into the hall and still there by the time lunch is over. If you've been to Eastover, you've seen how they have sort of makeshift crafted kindergarten rooms because back when Eastover was built, we had only half-day kindergarten. Our children get an excellent education in Bloomfield in spite of the buildings, not because of, and certainly not enhanced by, with the exception of the high school. I think that our kids deserve more. And then when you add in the safety considerations, definitely deserve more. We talk a lot about the elusive 80% and how to reach people in this demographic. And to me, my experience during my election on the board a little over a year and a half ago, my experience was this. We don't have to reach or market or sell to the 80% because they want what we all want. They want strong schools and they want a strong community. They want to do what's best for kids. I know that. I spoke to them. They want to know that schools are being handled well and that the kids are safe and sound. To me, this is something that we do together as a community, and it's something that we buy into and embark upon together. I'm sorry, I'm checking off the things that have been said, and it's a lot. So I'll be voting in favor of this bond, as recommended by the Scope and Design Committee. But the next question, why May? And I've heard it a lot. But to me, it just comes down to when you know what you need to do, why not May? I don't know how we can justify not getting started and sitting on this. We've been part of community frustration for a long time about how long it takes to implement ideas. This one is really good. We've all rallied behind it. I don't know how I can justify not putting it on the May ballot. Do we need to be sure? Do we need guarantees that this is going to pass? Those don't exist. It could be May, it could be August, it could be November. We will never get guarantees. If 2016 didn't teach us that, I don't know what will. But to keep something off of a ballot because it might fail, I have 2 kids in school right now. That's not the lesson I think I want any of our kids to learn. that we operate out of fear, that we don't take chances because something unfavorable might happen. That's not really the message I want to send any of the students. And if that's what's keeping us from putting this on a May ballot, to me, I sort of question what we're leaving our students with. They deserve more than that. They deserve people that will take well thought out chances, even when you don't know 100% of the outcome. So I am in favor of May, and I will be voting for the May date.
You can talk at the end if you want. We'll go around and you can close it. First, I'm going to read Jackie's. Jackie is not here today, again, due to business. She sent me a statement to read. Due to business travels for my job, I am unable to attend tonight's board meeting. Therefore, I've asked our board president to convey my thoughts. I want to thank all our residents who have worked so diligently on the scope and design report. The effort that went into this report was very inclusive and thorough. This work included many stakeholder meetings. It also included many meetings with the board, including the board instructional committee, board study sessions, and board updates, as well as one-on-one meetings with committee staff and the new superintendent. I attended all these board meetings and I actively asked many questions. The recommendations are very clear. Our K-8 buildings require major improvements to continue to provide our students with the best education, highest level of safety. When our community overwhelmingly approved the high school renovation, it was with the understanding that after the high school was completed, the board and district would then prioritize the work on the rest of the buildings. We have followed through on this. The committee has completed their work. We now have heard the recommendations for the work required to complete the project that was started with the renovation of our high school. I have personally reviewed the report, all the research, and community's feedback. Our duty is clear. Our students' education and safety require this work to be done now. For these reasons, I fully support the scope and design recommendation and the resolution on the May 2020 ballot. Ten years ago, when my family moved to Bloomfield Hills, and one of the main reasons was, in fact, the school district. As a finance guy, I realized that property values are linked to the schools both academically and structurally. As I personally became more involved in the community through the school district and various other community partnerships, it became clear how much our family, and especially myself, loves Bloomfield Hills. I can go anywhere across the country and say proudly, I live in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, where now I call home. As many of you know, I would do anything for our school district, but also the greater Bloomfield community. We as a school board have been talking for the last 2 to 3 years of providing our K-8 students a safer, secure learning environment, along with an education space to put our students at a competitive level of our peer school districts. We have the best families living in Bloomfield Hills. You people are passionate, caring, and given to our schools and community. The question is, why do we need to go out for a bond now to our community? Our schools need at least $33 million to keep our buildings upkeep in the next 2 to 3 years. Our sinking fund, which our community generally gave us last year, is only a couple of $1 million a year for our urgent repairs and not the needed renovations to our facilities that is needed. Our K-8 buildings are not safe based on today's standards, in addition to the $33 million needed for upkeep. Our K-8 buildings have not been renovated since the 1950s, putting our students at a competitive disadvantage academically and for co-curricular opportunities to our peer school districts. Even our new superintendent, Pat Watson, commented on his site visits on how shocked he was looking at the infrastructure and conditions of our buildings. We have an opportunity with this bond to help enhance our community experience and bring more of our community connected to school district properties. With all the above, we as a community will not only continue to be competitive, but will be the most attractive destination for families within and out of the state of Michigan as property values will continue as they have over the last several years to grow. Now for the what. We as a community were lucky enough to have a team of over 40 community members to spend over 100 hours of their volunteer time to come up with a high-level plan working with subject matter experts that is fiscally responsible, meets the needs of safety, education, and community, is a plan that can be enhanced based on community feedback, but I'm comfortable based on the endless hours that the team spent. This plan is inclusive of all the needs of our students and the greater Bloomfield community. Finally, the biggest concern right now for many who have not been close to all this work done to this point is why go on the ballot in May. I, as school board president, want to talk to as many as possible as to why the plan fits our needs and why we need to go out on the May ballot. I personally have expanded my Facebook network, started discussing on Nextdoor, Twitter, and engaged and will continue to engage with as many people as possible regarding our plan. Many from the community have told us already. Why wait 3 to 6 months, as the time is right now to provide our students and community this plan? If anyone has ideas how to reach more people, please let us know. As our superintendent, in collaboration with his cabinet team, indicated tonight, waiting post-May 2020 could potentially cost us a year in getting the plan executed and could cost efficiencies and cost and operational costs of construction of close to $2.3 million. A school board challenged if, as a school district, we're being fiscally responsible to our taxpayers in comparison to other communities, and as presented, we will still be one of the lowest tax residents in terms of school millages in Oakland County, even if the bond passes. I love this community and will always do my best to represent all the voters to do what I think is the best interest of Bloomfield Hills. I am constantly networking and seeking best practices from other communities. I feel in my heart the plan and the May ballot is the right move for our community in order to grow and flourish as a community.
The decision we make tonight is a generational and transformational investment in our school district that will support the education of our children well into the future. I believe we have earned the support of our community voters in favor of this bond proposal through long-term, demonstrated, and prudent fiscal stewardship over many years. The Board of Education has had to make many hard decisions over the years in order to preserve, protect, and enhance educational opportunities that our children deserve. It's time for us to make this fiscally and environmentally responsible investment in our assets for our children. My husband was recruited by Beaumont, and we chose to move to Michigan in the Bloomfield Hills School District with a 9-month-old baby and a 3-year-old in 1986. I worked to support my first school bond proposal in 1988. At that time, the community supported the addition of fine arts wings onto our 6 elementary schools. That was 32 years ago. In 1997, after Proposal A had passed in 1994 and school funding had radically changed, I served on the Blue Ribbon Committee to develop, recommend a bond proposal of $25 million to the Board of Education for facility updates and technology across the district, and I co-chaired the campaign to successfully pass that bond. That very conservative funding request only addressed urgent needs in Bloomfield Hills schools. And while we were very careful about our funding request, our neighboring districts and peers were asking for much higher amounts. And so we began to fall behind in improving our facilities. In the ensuing years, with the wonderful support of our voters, we have built a new high school, and we've passed a sinking fund which has allowed us to address many, many needs. But now is the time when we've been experiencing serious challenges in academic programming at our middle schools for several years, while at the same time facing major urgent facility needs of about $33 million. Now is the time to make this wise investment into our school district to support our children for the next 30 years. This investment will allow us to address academic challenges while also addressing multiple other needs across the district. As a senior citizen now on a fixed income, I recognize that this bond proposal is very big. But as my husband and I begin thinking about selling our home and downsizing, we can see that our ability to sell our 1960s home to a new young family will be largely dependent on how our schools compare with our neighboring communities. As much as my kitchen needs a major investment, so do our schools. The proceeds from the sale of these bonds will be spread across 13 sites around our district and bring a wonderful makeover for the benefit of our whole community. Some of the top issues addressed in the plan address heightened concern for safety and security, ADA compliance upgrades, and better appropriate spaces for service for our children with special needs, practice rooms, and small ensemble spaces for band and orchestra programs, updated technology, and a great deal more. I am thrilled that we have this opportunity to improve our facilities such that we enhance our students' learning environment and opportunities, while at the same time providing new experiences for our whole community at the Farm and Nature Center, green spaces and playgrounds, as well as a new swimming pool for middle school and community use at North Middle School at the Lasser site. As our school district serves as the Recreation and Community Service Department for Bloomfield Township and the City of Bloomfield Hills, and we have no legal authority to request a millage to support those services or facilities, this bond is also the best way we have available to build a brighter future for the education of our children, while simultaneously building better facilities to engage and enhance our whole community. When the community approved our high school bond in May of 2012, our Board of Education and Superintendent were clear that the funds approved then would only address the high school, and that we knew then that we would need to come back to our voters before too long to address important needs for elementary and middle schools. 8 years later, that time has come. Beginning with our master property planning process in 2014, continuing with multiple studies of our world language and fine arts programs and our whole middle school philosophy, our strategic planning, community surveys, focus panels, and most recently Scope and Design Committee, we have defined the case to share with our community about what we believe is a great plan for the future of our school district that responsibly uses and enhances existing facilities, that also supports and improves instruction for our children. I want to thank everyone who participated on all of those committees, focus groups, and surveys, because you all helped to develop this plan. I am proud to support this plan to be on the ballot in May for Bloomfield Hills School's brighter future.
Pat?
First, I'd like to make sure I reassure everyone that as an organization, our primary focus will remain on teaching and learning. That is what we're about. That being said, this is 6 years in the making. How many more years do we need to continue to discuss what needs to be done? As someone that walked in on day one, it was painfully obvious that the time is now. I've heard from a lot of stakeholders that May might be an unusual date. So I was lucky and fortunate enough to get some research information handed to me. We would be one of over 40 school districts going for a bond in May of 2020. May is not an unusual date. As I've said before, when you know better, you need to do better. And that time is now, and that time is May of 2020. Thank you.
I want to make, before we vote, in retrospect, because I want to make an amendment to the agenda for public comment.
Good. I was going to suggest that
Yeah.
before we vote. we
Support,
should hear-
all in
yeah.
favor, say yes.
Also, I'd like to consider making we haven't made the resolution yet, or done
Well,
the-
let's-
done the
Let's
motion.
public comment.
Yeah, we'll do public comment then.
Yes, correct, yes. One
Do
card.
you have cards? No.
That's fine, that's fine. If anyone else wants a public comment, Rebecca, where are the blue cards? They're in the hallway? Yeah, you can go in the podium, wherever you want to stand, Elizabeth. We need to pull it.
My name's Elizabeth Stieg. I live on Lenox Road on the east side of the district. I went K through 12 in the 60s and the 70s. And my mother taught in the district. And my children went to school K through 12. In fact, I went to kindergarten in the same room my mother taught in, and the same room that both my daughters went to school in. Wow. So if anybody has nostalgia about this district, it's me, and especially that room. But I gotta say, it looks exactly the same. And I said that 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago was the first time I saw this plan. I had heard rumblings that something might be coming, and I was getting frustrated that, frankly, I didn't know about it. And as active as I had been with the district, especially with the bond for the high school, I felt kind of out of place because I didn't know. But clearly, there's been a group of people who thought this through very carefully. Administrators, staff, community, parents, and the community at large. I'm part of that 80%. I am quote unquote a senior. But I want to say, having learned about it only 2 weeks ago, this needs to be done. And frankly, from my point of view, the sooner the better. While the total amount actually was kind of jaw-dropping to me, I thought about it. It's over 12 sites. All the schools, including the International Academy, the farm, transportation, you name it. And we're using existing buildings for the most part, with additions. So when you think of it in terms of that, I think it's a reasonable plan. I also feel, and you pointed out just now, that all these other districts, or over the course of this evening, other districts have been doing this all along, and we have not. We need to do it now. Last weekend, all my friends call me the data geek. I'm a nerd with that. I went through all my taxes from 1997 when I moved in the home I'm in now, and I lived in another home. And it was really fascinating to look at the tax value and the assessed value of my home over the years. It was going up, 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 and 2008 hit. Well, it really didn't hit its lowest point until 2013. And since 2013, my assessed value, the SEV, has gone up quite a bit. But I'm reaping the benefits of low inflation since 2013 because I've stayed in my home. And so have other community members if they've been living in their home. Now, if you have a newer home that was built afterward, I suspect even newer homes that you were living in maybe are appreciating faster than my home built in 1966. But the point is that I calculated the taxes on my home, and it's not much. It's less than $300 for me per year. And I think about what I spend money on. Dinner with my 2 daughters last night was $100. It wasn't even that fancy a restaurant. A cell phone, whatever. We don't even think about it, and we pay out money like that. So I guess at this point, I'm not speaking to you all, I'm speaking to the community at large. And I know there are folks on fixed incomes, but the reality is I benefited with state-of-the-art facilities in the 60s and the 70s. And now the students of today are working within, and the staff and the teachers are working at that level of building from the 60s and the 70s. They're no longer state-of-the-art. And while this is all about education, the instruction and the facilities work like a hand in a glove. We need to have both. We need to have that stellar education and stellar facilities. We absolutely have to. So, again, as a member of this community, and as I'm looking at all those little figures on the wall over there, those children who drew on those little figures deserve the education that I had in the 60s and the 70s. I am willing to pay. Again, I live in a smaller home than most, but I think this community should look at the proposal and read it, listen to what it has to say. If you were unaware of it, so was I, but I was convinced almost in a night by looking at the presentation. If you disagree with it in the community, take a deep breath, look at it in detail, and really truly look at their hearts. Some will vote no. I hope most will vote yes. But I just wanted to say that the kids need this now. I guess I'm saying I would vote for May because I think it needs to be sooner than later. And if learning just tonight that if it means a whole delay in a year with getting construction documents going and the planning of that, then I would vote for May. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Do I have a motion on scope and design?
Mr. President, we move that the Board of Education approve the scope and design recommendations brought forth by the Scope and Design Committee as presented at the January 16th, 2020 study session.
Support.
All those in discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Do I have a motion for a resolution?
We should read it. Does anyone want to read it? Do you want to read it, Cynthia? I want to give you the honor because what you said was so beautiful, and we should put that on the website.
This is the resolution that we're proposing.
Whereas the school district is contemplating undertaking various capital improvements to facilities within the school district, which includes erecting, completing, equipping, and furnishing additions to school buildings and other facilities, which include multi-purpose gymnasium, cafeteria, and auditorium cafeteria rooms, classrooms, secure entryways, an auditorium, and athletic facility additions, remodeling, equipping, re-equipping, furnishing, refurnishing school buildings, athletic fields, playgrounds, and other facilities, acquiring, preparing, developing, and improving sites for school buildings, athletic fields, playgrounds, and other facilities, erecting, completing, equipping, and furnishing a new transportation maintenance warehouse center, and the purchase of school buses, and acquiring and installing instructional technology infrastructure and equipment in school buildings and other facilities, collectively, the projects. Whereas the school district is of the opinion that in order to finance the projects, a bond proposal should be submitted to the electors at a special school election. Whereas the school district is the Michigan General Power School District operating under the revised school code as amended, and as such, the school district's elections are governed by the Michigan Election Law, Act 116, Public Acts of Michigan, 1954, as amended, Michigan Election Law. Whereas the school district desires to submit a bond proposal to the electors at a special school election to be held on May 5th, 2020, which election will be conducted by the school district's election coordinator. Whereas Michigan election law requires that the school district certify the ballot language for any proposals to be submitted for voter approval at an allowable election date to the school district's election coordinator not later than 4:00 p.m. on the 12th Tuesday before the election date. Whereas the school district desires to approve and certify the above referenced bond proposal and to authorize the superintendent or his designee to submit the certified bond proposal to the school district's election coordinator, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Bloomfield Hills Schools, County of Oakland, Michigan, that 1, the school improvement bond proposal attached hereto as Exhibit A is hereby approved and certified and shall be submitted to the electors at a special school election to be held on May 5th, 2020. 2, the superintendent or his designee are authorized to submit the above referenced proposal to the school district's election coordinator on or before 4:00 p.m. on February 11th, 2020, which is not later than the 12th Tuesday before the special school election to be held on May 5th, 2020. And 3, the superintendent or his designee are further authorized to take any and all action required under the Michigan election law with regard to the special school election to be held on May 5th, 2020.
Thank you, Cynthia. Do I have a motion?
That was resolution. I move that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as read by Cynthia.
Do I have support?
Support.
Roll call. Jennifer?
Do you want discussion?
Mr. President,
Discussion?
we have discussion. Are we gonna, how do you want to go around the room?
Go, Howard.
Yeah, I'm not saying.
I think we all had we
Yeah.
said our
Oh,
5 minutes.
I-
That's what I thought the discussion was.
No,
but-
no, no. I have a separate
Okay.
comment on this. When I was working at Chrysler, one of the major responsibilities of my job was to assist the corporation in avoiding uncertainty and risk. Every month, when I completed the financial forecast for my division, I was required to submit a document called a Risk and Opportunities Assessment. It highlighted issues that could occur in the future that would have a negative impact on my division or the corporation. To determine these risks, we need to look into the future, do research into what is ahead, and assess future negative impacts. As we consider putting the Scope and Design Committee recommendations on the future ballot, I need to make sure that I need to know what our public thinks of this proposal. Do they agree with the district that this is needed investment to our buildings? Are they willing to pay an additional 1.85 mils for these improvements? If they are not willing to vote yes at this time, are there any changes they would like us to make to this proposal that would move them to a yes? These are all very important questions that I think we should have the answers to prior to making this very important decision. We can obtain this information by having a poll done by a professional polling firm, by having town halls via electronic communication and through public comment. This will not only provide us a critical information, but it also show the taxpayers that we are listening to them and open to their feedback and suggestions. I am opposed to skipping over this very important step in the process. Going directly to the ballot without asking the taxpayers first what they think is a risky proposition and increases the probability of not being successful. As we have learned with the high school bond a decade ago, the citizens have the final say on any millage. We should ask them what they think before we ask them to vote.
Any other comments, discussion?
I just want to say, I think that we certainly have a lot more people to reach, but we have been asking, and we have gotten feedback by a lot of community members and in a lot of different formats. The whole Scope and Design Committee was made up of the community. Each one of those 40 people went out to their people to get feedback and brought it to the committee, and you can see it. One of the things that I remember hearing from one of the committee members who was a board member some time ago, she said all of the community feedback is rolled into this plan. It's considered every different group, every different sector of the community, and you can see it in the plan. I think that's why I wasn't in the room, and I really wish that I had been. But when they hit this plan after many, many different tries and errors and combinations, they knew it was right because it had every bit of the community reflected in it. The plan itself is the feedback of the community. I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think it's going to be a very busy 3 months, but I 100% disagree that we haven't asked the community for feedback, and I 100% disagree that we haven't gotten it, at least some of it.
And I will say that we have talked to a subset of the community, and they're primarily the parents and past parents and very active people in the district. But as Ms. Steeg said, the vast majority of the voting population, the 80%, really have very little awareness of this at all. Yes, we've been working on it for 4 or 5 years in various areas of the organization, but the the vast majority of the voters in this community do not know at all what we are talking about, and that is what is concerning me in terms of using the ballot in May as a poll, as an assessment to get a feeling of what the community feels. I would much prefer having a professional poll done and town halls, so we're really going to the senior center, going to other community groups that are not connected to the schools at all, and hearing what their thoughts are.
Well, we're going to do all.
We are poised to do all of those things.
After we have already put it on the ballot. So if there were any changes that they recommended to us, we can listen, but we can't make any changes to the proposal. The 200 million will be the 200 million.
But the renovations are flexible.
Anyway.
So we can take their feedback.
Let us move on.
Feedback.
Let us move on. I mean, obviously, we've had this
And I want to
discussion
say,
offline
we
for
had
a
this,
number of
yeah,
weeks
and we
now.
had this discussion last meeting as well. I mean, I appreciate that you think that you're looking out for the 80%, but I think it's a little bit, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little offended on behalf of the 80% when you characterize them as having no understanding of what's going on. I think that really misrepresents them. I think, look what you saw tonight. There's people that we were honoring from all over the community who want to be there for the kids, who support the kids. They don't need to know down to the minutia detail what the plan entails. What they need to know is, we think it's good.
I think the goal, I mean, I don't like to, I've been told by people, I don't want to label anyone as 80%, we want to reach as many people as possible in the new day and age, and we're looking for feedback from the community how to do that. I recently, in talking to some community members, I recently went on Nextdoor. I've expanded, I'm trying to expand, my Facebook network, as I indicated. We're trying as much as we can to reach as many people as possible and answer as many questions. And as indicated, the why May is it's necessary to do this. We employed a group of people that spent over 100 hours going through what the concerns are to have the right design. And we're not here to hide anything to anybody. If there's a way to reach as many people as possible, as many people have seen, as many people, forget myself, as many people have seen, our new superintendent is willing to meet as many people as possible wherever to explain why this is good for the community.
I'd just like to say, Howard, I do appreciate your concern, and I think what it means is it's a responsibility for us to invite homeowners associations, invite all of those constituent groups, Optimist, Rotary Club, Senior Center, make it our responsibility to get out and be able to answer questions. We know that we have an enthusiastic group of folks who have already stepped up to try to help us to get that word out, and so people will understand it. I understand your wish to get a professional poll done before, but I do think that we do have a sense of urgency to move forward sooner rather than later. And as I weighed the positive and negatives on that, I really felt the preponderance of weight was to go as soon as possible, and that did not allow, because we do need to get this to move forward to the clerk's office by the 12th Tuesday before the election date, that we need to move forward and work with our community and help them understand, because we don't have that luxury of time right now. I think we do have urgency to move forward. We know we have urgent needs in our buildings. We don't want to be throwing good money after bad because we're waiting longer. And so I hear you, but because as I've weighed those pluses and minuses, I really feel the urgency to move forward now.
And as public servants, it is also incumbent upon us to take it to the citizens. Of course, we have town halls, we ask them to come. We, the seven of us, are picking up the phone, emailing, knocking on doors. This plan I've never seen a plan that has been more vetted and researched and hashed out. Is $200 million a shocking amount of money? Of course it is. It is nothing that our sister communities haven't done. It is less scale-wise than several of our well-regarded sister communities have done, and it is the absolute right and necessary thing to do. And knowing that, although it is risky to go out there with incomplete information, but knowing what we know, we have to listen, but we also have to educate and share information and make that outreach, because I am fully optimistic that more than 50% of our community can back a plan such as this, which is this sound.
And I'll let my statement speak for myself, but as you saw, I put the proposal on the table for endorsing the scope and design concept. So it's not the what, it's purely the when, is my concern. And obviously, it's a democratic situation here, and we will vote.
And I think the point is that the what all works for everyone. We just need to get out there and explain that to as many people as possible that we may not be reaching by our normal means. And as I've said, we're open to any suggestions. Myself as board president, Pat, we will be flexible with our schedules and go to any meeting and talk to any homeowners, any group. Just let us know where and when, and we'll be willing to do that. With that, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.